following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove podcast. We're talking NBA champions, as well as the latest news, Major League Baseball standings, and NFL quarterback tiers, talking fantasy football today. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove podcast.
From Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network, you're listening to the Sports Stove Podcast with your host, Vince Stover.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?
Welcome into an all-new edition of the Sports Stove Podcast, presented by Righteous Felon Jerky, your one-stop shop for the greatest jerky on the planet. Join the flavor revolution at righteousfelon.com and use the promo code STOVE15 at checkout. You're going to get 15% off your purchase. Well, we are back a couple days later than normal this week, but still plenty of things to talk about. I'm your host, Vince Stover, joined as I am each week by my dad, Dale Stover. Dad, how you doing? Doing good here getting in the middle of summer now. Well, I guess just the first day of summer technically, but definitely end of summer and end of the summer sports seasons and things that go on. So, yes, yeah, we had a large conversation about the first day of summer a couple days ago, and I said no, summer started as soon as school got out. So that's the way it goes. It's too hot for it to not be summer. So, nonetheless, let's start with the sport that has ended. And that's the NBA, your Boston Celtics, who you watched every single night and cheered them on to the championship win in 5 games over the Dallas Mavericks, and really convincingly in the 4 games that they won as well. And Jaylen Brown kind of stepped up to a new height here in this postseason and looked phenomenal throughout the whole process as well. But the Celtics are champs, and Dad, I know I would joke about it, but at the end of the day, you are a Celtics fan. So how do you feel about that? Yes, yes, I am. And of course, the Celtics, have great tradition. There are several NBA teams that do, but the Celtics have, like I said, they were good when I was real young, and so I kind of attached back with Bill Russell and all that, and have just stayed with them, and they've won a lot of championships and with a lot of different players and a lot of different stars. When you look at it from there, of course, you had the Larry Bird days, you had the Dave Cowan days, you had the Garnett days, and now it looks like they're going to be a good team for a while. With the NBA, so much changes around with free agency and that, but they kind of held everybody together this year, and I would think they'll be, a good team for several more years, at least the possibilities there. So, yeah, as a Celtic fan, I think, Celtic people are proud, won the 18th championship. That's quite a deal there. And I was a little worried coming into it, but, they played well. The one game, of course, they got beat bad, but that wasn't, that wasn't a big issue because they come back and won the next one, which you kind of figured that they would there. It was an interesting year. Again, I don't follow the NBA a lot, but it was an interesting year. Teams were good that hadn't been good, I think, in the last couple of years. And, definitely some of the ones that made the playoffs. And so, we'll just see where the NBA goes. I'm sure it'll continue to be very, very popular. Yeah, I mean, I think, having Luka in the finals was a good thing for the NBA. Just again to see some of the superstars be there. Tatum, of course, has always been kind of looked at as the better of the two there in Boston, but Jaylen Brown really rose to the occasion and looked great in the postseason, and a lot of people respect him. I've always liked his style and his play, but a lot of people respect him more now as the star that he is as well. The Mavericks did blow out the Celtics in Game 4, but Boston got the win at home and celebrate there. And I think that was fun for them. So Celtics are the champs, and there's no question about it. They were the best team. Really, we talked about it when we started the playoffs. They were the clear-cut best team as far as regular season went this year. And so they end up winning as well in the championship. There's a lot of news going on in the NBA. Of course, the draft is coming up in the not-so-distant future. The Bulls trade Alex Caruso to Oklahoma City. They get Giddey in return, and they're saying now Lonzo Ball will be bought out. So there's some changes there. Pascal Siakam reportedly signing a max deal with the Pacers. Malik Monk deciding to stay with the Kings as well. And then, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers, who got rejected by Dan Hurley, looked for a coach, and they ended up interviewing someone they had not interviewed before they offered the job to Hurley, and JJ Redick. Of course, Redick is not, he's not been retired that long. He's never coached before at a head coaching level, especially. And now he gets to take over a team that is, player coached by LeBron James. I'm not even sure. I don't think there's a single person with coaching experience that wants to coach LeBron anymore, because he's not guaranteed to get you a championship, and you're going to get fired the moment something goes wrong. So JJ Redick, though, why not take the job? He's going to get paid, and he gets an opportunity to be a head coach. And, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. He can go back to TV. So it's an interesting hire. I don't think it's a good hire, but it's an interesting hire. And I think it's the kind of hire that the Lakers were going to have to make, because after you see all the coaches that have been fired because LeBron James didn't want to take the blame, the only kind of guy that's going to accept this job is a guy that can't get a job anywhere else. So JJ Redick, the new head coach of the Lakers, we will see who gets blamed this year, whether it's Redick, whether it's Anthony Davis, whether it's the role players, whoever it may be. I can guarantee you it will not be LeBron James who gets blamed for the lack of success. And of course, Dad, they might even have to draft LeBron's son just because LeBron tells them to. I don't know. It's a weird offseason just as a result of those things going on there as well. Do you have any thoughts on the JJ Redick hire in Los Angeles?
No, you covered it pretty well. The Lakers are just, it's a tough situation there. LeBron, has total control of it, and it's not really going in the right direction, and I don't know that it's going to at this point. But like you said, it gives him a chance to be a coach, to have the job there in the NBA. But again, it's a tough situation because, like you said, LeBron really controls everything there, and he, he's been a great player, but he's not at the point of his career where he can, guarantee a championship by himself. He hasn't been able to do that. So, Lakers are, like I said, a job, but like I said, when Hurley turned it down, that really says a lot. So, we will see. I don't expect the Lakers to make any big, waves in the near future.
I don't think Dan Hurley turning it down says a lot, honestly. Hurley was offered the Kentucky job, didn't take it. The Lakers job, a little bit more money. It is the Lakers, it is the NBA, but his roster coming back to UConn is going to be really good. He can be a 3-time champ. The college, basketball game is as popular as the NBA, in my opinion, especially when you're one of the top teams in the country. So I was not surprised that Hurley turned it down. I think you always have to assume they're going to take it just because, again, it is professional and a lot of guys want to go to that level. But Hurley's going to get a chance to go, if he wants to, back to the NBA or to the NBA, and might have a better opportunity than what was presented to him there with Los Angeles. So I don't think that's shocking necessarily. I think but you had to assume it definitely could have happened. But I think Hurley made the right choice in going back to UConn as well. NHL Stanley Cup playoffs is down to game number 6. The puck will drop momentarily, and Florida is up in the series 3-2 over Edmonton. This is a series that looked like it was over pretty quickly, and then all of a sudden it became a series. I have not watched any of the games as I don't really do a whole lot of hockey watching these days. But Dad, your thoughts on Florida and Edmonton going at it in game 6 tonight?
Well, going into it, I thought, Florida would be the team that would probably come out with the cup. Of course, they have not won one before, and they looked very, very strong early on. But Edmonton, of course, was able to get the game at home, then was able to go down into Florida. So and they're back at Edmonton tonight. So if they were to win tonight, then it would be a very interesting Game 7 because anybody, can win. And of course, Edmonton is Connor McDavid, and they have a talented team, but Florida has a lot of talent also. So, but it's become an interesting series. It looked like it would be all Florida, and they would wrap it up there at home, but they did not. So, I'm sure the NHL is excited that it's going longer. And again, if people like hockey at all and watching playoff hockey and the Stanley Cup hockey, is exciting, no doubt about it. If the game's close at all, the last 2 or 3 minutes of a playoff hockey game it's unbelievable. So we'll see. I'm going to watch at least some of it tonight, maybe most of it, and we'll just see. It'd be interesting to see if they get to the final game, Game 7.
Yeah. The Panthers controlled the first 2 games. And then they won by only 1 goal in game number 3. So that one got close. Then the Oilers dominated game 4, just like the Mavericks did over Boston, 8-1 in that game. Then the Oilers won 5-3. And again, now they face off. Now the Panthers were the better team in the regular season. They had 6 more points than Edmonton. That being said, it's been a tight enough series. And it could be a really fun because Game 7 in the NHL, well, any Game 7 is usually fun. But hockey, I don't know. There's something about it that those pivotal games, there's a lot of energy around those for sure. Dad, let's go into Willie Mays. We're going to talk more baseball later in the show. But, of course, Willie Mays passed away this week, and a legendary figure in baseball, amongst other things in America as well. And his passing, of course, he was old, and it's not like we lost somebody too soon. But that being said, Willie Mays was in your era of coming into baseball fandom. So how do you feel about the situation with Willie Mays?
Yeah, well, Willie Mays, of course, was my first sports hero when I was young. Baseball was the first thing. A lot of my family kept up with baseball, and it was big in the area there. And Willie Mays was just a tremendous player. I've always been prejudiced and always thought he was the best baseball player ever. Most people would say he was one of the best all-around players, and definitely one of them. It would be hard to ever list, the greatest baseball players of all time, and Willie Mays' name not come up. And one of them, he was such a complete player. That was the thing. He's a home run hitter. He hit for average. He stole bases. He was a great fielder. He has the catch in 1954 there that they still call the catch. He had a great arm. He could throw from, the wall out in the outfield and just could play everywhere around. And was a great player. I think even afterward, he was a great ambassador for baseball, always still kept up there. I know with the Giants, I've heard Buster Posey talk about him, that, Willie would always come into the locker room, love to be around the players. And he was a baseball player. He didn't have some of the stats, in the finals for different reasons. He played a couple years in the Negro League before he went in the major leagues there. Then he was in the service for 2 years. He played a lot of baseball in the service, but obviously wasn't in Major League Baseball, so didn't have stats. And then he played at San Francisco in Candlestick Park. And, everybody knew that, the ball there are a lot of home runs that were held up in Candlestick Park. Hank Aaron, a great player. I do think Willie Mays would have easily had that record had he played somewhere else. But he didn't. And again, he was a great ambassador for baseball. I've been very happy to hear all the comments in the last few days about him and just celebrating him as a person, and especially as a baseball player there. So, he definitely one of the best. And, again, like I said, he lived a long life. And so, it's a lot to remember in baseball with Willie Mays and the players like him.
Very well put. Very well put. All right, let's transition now. We are going to, over the next several weeks, talk a lot of fantasy football on each of our episodes. And, we've got a segment during our fantasy baseball show every week we call the Fantasy Focus. We're going to carry that over to this program now as well. So let's get into this week's Fantasy Focus. Fantasy Focus is presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com. There's a lot of content coming out of BellyUpFantasySports.com right now, and football content is starting to roll. You need to head over to BellyUpFantasySports.com and check out all the great content coming out right now. And we're starting with the quarterback position, and what we're doing this year, we are breaking up our fantasy rankings into tiers as opposed to just going 1 to 10. We're just going to break them up into different tiers. And I've got 9 guys into 5 tiers. And the way I look at it is if I can get somebody out of my top 3 tiers, I'm going to be pretty happy. My draft philosophy typically with quarterback is to wait on quarterback and try to get other things first and then snag a quarterback later on in the draft. We do have a league where the quarterback actually scores as much, if not more, than everybody else. So that will change my strategy in that league. But I look at these top 3 tiers and think if I can get one of these guys, I'll be pretty happy. If I have to get a guy in the 4th tier, I can survive it, but I'd prefer to get somebody in the top 3 tiers. But let's start with tier number 1 because people have different thoughts on who are the top, and I think it's pretty obvious who the top 2 guys are for sure. I've got 4 guys though in tier number 1. What do you have in your tier number 1?
Yeah, I have 4 guys. Again, I set my tiers up a little bit different. I have really basically all the quarterbacks in one of 5 tiers. And basically, I feel like the 1st and 2nd tier, if you had one of them, you would have a legitimate starting quarterback that would be good for you there. But yeah, I have 4 guys also in the 1st tier.
All right, who you have there?
I have Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Jordan Love.
Seriously?
Yeah, as far as fantasy is concerned, I don't think there's any doubt about that because they're going to score, and I think he'll be a high-scoring quarterback. There could be argument about, if you're just rating quarterbacks and teams from there, but I think when you look at the fantasy part of it, I don't think there'll be any doubt that he'll be a high-scoring fantasy quarterback.
Okay, so our tier is very different then. I have Mahomes and Jackson also. I got Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts here too, because when you're looking at fantasy football, you're looking at guys that are going to run and throw the football. And Allen, Hurts, and Jackson are each going to do that. They have shown us in the past that they can put up big numbers in fantasy football as well. So it's not a guessing game with these guys. It's we have years of stats to show us what they're going to do. I think I'm more surprised that you don't have Josh Allen in tier 1. I am surprised you have Jordan Love in tier 1. But I'm probably more surprised. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. But Josh Allen is not there for you, considering that especially this year, they're probably going to depend on his legs more than what they have in the past, in my opinion, at least. So what was the thought process behind keeping Josh Allen out of tier 1?
Well, Josh Allen was real close. I almost put 5 guys up there. Again, this year, I think when you look at the talent around him and what he has, he is going to run, no doubt about that, and that's going to help. But I don't think there's anything wrong with him being in tier 1. But I felt like just looking at the talent, some of the talent he has and does not have, he fit a little more in the top of tier 2. I have tier 2, 2A, and 2B. And I have three guys in the top of 2A, and Hurts and Allen are 2 of those.
I gotcha. Okay. So give us the rest of your tier 2 because I've given mine already.
Tier 2, I have Hurts, Allen, and CJ Stroud as the top. And then the other 4 guys I have in tier 2, Two of them does have a little bit to do with whether they recover from injuries, which would be Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. And then I had Herbert and Jared Goff.
Interesting. Okay, so my tier 2 is got 3 guys: CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Joe Burrow. Now, Richardson is the wild card in this ranking because obviously health is an issue. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a very good fantasy football player. If he gets hurt, which last year he did a couple of times before eventually being done for the season, obviously that'll drop his, and you'll see in my other tiers, I have dropped guys because of injury issues. I just think Richardson is young enough that he can overcome that he's going to get smarter. The coaches are going to be smarter on how they handle him as well. So I put him there. Burrow, I didn't know where to put Joe Burrow. You've got him in tier 1. I didn't even think about that. My question was between tier 2 and tier 3. Because again, his talent level dropped this year. They lose Joe Mixon. They lose their number 3 receiver in Tyler Boyd, but he was more than a normal number 3 receiver. And so I have some concerns about Joe Burrow. He has had health issues as well, but he's a really good quarterback. So I've got him in tier 2. CJ Stroud, everybody's going to like CJ Stroud. I think Stroud is going to get drafted above some of these guys in tier 1 in some leagues just because people like him. But that being said, I think he belongs here in this tier, in tier number 2, with Stroud, Richardson, and Burrow. Now, you mentioned guys in your tier 2 that are in my tier 3. So I've got Jared Goff and Justin Herbert both in tier number 3. I've got Jordan Love in tier number 3. And then I've got 3 other guys, Dak Prescott, who numbers-wise should probably be higher as far as what he's produced fantasy-wise, especially last year. But again, he had some talent drop-off as well. And he has some injury issues too. So I've got him in tier 3. Kyler Murray, who should be better this year than in the past. Again, I think he's a questionable guy as far as where do you put him, because, we just don't know exactly what we're going to get out of him just yet. But if he stays healthy, they've added weapons for him. I think he'll be good. And I've got Tua in tier number 3 as well. His weapons are so good in Miami that as long as he stays healthy, he's going to have fantasy numbers. And so those are the guys, those top 3 tiers that I say I'm comfortable with. I would be absolutely shocked if I have Jared Goff on my fantasy football team, for the record, but that's where he ranks at. And then Justin Herbert, Dad, you had him in your tier 2. And I understand that. But again, I think with the Jim Harbaugh coming in, I've actually knocked him down a little bit. He loses all his weapons, and he's now going to be in a very run-heavy system. And we saw what JJ McCarthy got to do in college. Herbert will do more than that in the pros, but I just don't think we're going to see the boom out of Justin Herbert this year that some people think that maybe we will.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense there. So, and you didn't have Rodgers or Cousins up there at all.
No, I did not. So let's go to your tier 3. I'll talk about Rodgers and Cousins more when I get to them coming up soon. But the rest of your tier, who's your tier 3?
Tier 3, and then I had Deshaun Watson. I had Trevor Lawrence, had Richardson there, Zach Prescott, Baker Mayfield, Stafford, who I think is going to have a really good year potentially this year, and he has some weapons, and then Tua, and I did have Brock Purdy in there.
Man, this is intriguing, Dad. I'm surprised. Now, I'm a Baker fan. Like, I am a Baker fan. I'm surprised where you have Baker compared to, I guess, the rookies, because everybody else makes sense. I can understand, and whatever it may be. I guess your lack of rookies, which I have a lack of rookies at this point as well. Your lack of rookies I thought maybe some of those would creep into your tier 3. And I'm surprised Baker's ahead of those guys, I guess.
Well, I think looking at the rookies this year and where they're at, I think the safest thing about a rookie is if you get a really good first quarterback then okay, then take one of the rookies and see if maybe he pans out. But I don't think any of them are geared. I think some may end up being real good. But as far as fantasy football and drafting, I wouldn't bank my team on any of them to start with. I would rather go with one of the veterans. And again, then if you got one of the rookies as your second quarterback, and he excels better than Dak Prescott or a Baker Mayfield or a Matt Stafford, then it would be to your advantage. But I don't know of any of them. A part of them is just because of the teams they're with. They're not what's going to be with necessarily great teams. Even though some people think Chicago will be, I don't think it's a set thing yet.
Well, you got to remember, too, it's not even just necessarily about team. It's really all about offense. Because if the defense is bad, well, the quarterback's going to throw more. So a bad defense can help a fantasy quarterback, which has been how the Lions had good fantasy quarterbacks for so long. But I think that you're undervaluing, and I know I don't have any rookies in that tier either. But I have them all ahead of Baker Mayfield. I think I don't know that you're able to separate your hatred for Chicago with what Caleb Williams can be this year in fantasy football because of the weapons that he has, both at running back, at tight end, and at wide receiver. And I think they are going to be playing close games or games from behind a fair amount this season too. And if he is anything close to what he's being promoted as, then, Jay Cutler was a good fantasy quarterback. The Bears stunk under Jay Cutler. And I think Caleb Williams will be better than Jay Cutler. And I think his weapons, Caleb Williams has arguably the best weapons around him. At the very least, as a rookie, he definitely does. And probably top 5 weapons in the league right now as far as the totality of it, because he's got really good tight ends, he's got really good running backs, and he's got veteran and savvy receivers along with a young rookie receiver that we're assuming is going to be good as well. That being said, Dad, that's where my rookies fall as tier number 4. I've got Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels both in tier number 4. I like Jaden Daniels as a fantasy quarterback as well. Again, he's going to provide that athleticism and the running ability mixed with he has sneaky good weapons too in Washington. So I think both Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are going to be fantasy relevant this year. Now, I did not put them in tier number 3 just because of how I had my breakdown going. But I think both of them will be fantasy relevant. I have Trevor Lawrence in this category. I've got Kirk Cousins in here. And the only reason Cousins is this low is because of injury. I want to see him come back. I want to see what he's like when he comes back. He has weapons too, but his health really scares me down there in Atlanta. I've got Matt Stafford here. He should probably be higher, but I like him in this category. Deshaun Watson, because we have not seen Deshaun Watson be Deshaun Watson since he was in Houston. I've got Aaron Rodgers in this category. Again, health is an issue for me with Aaron Rodgers. I really don't think he can withstand an 18-game season. And so I think that Rodgers that's why I've got him so low. And then I've got 2 other guys, Brock Purdy, and I've got Bryce Young. I've got him in bold because I really think Bryce Young is going to surprise people this year and come out. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 quarterback necessarily, but I think he's going to be a whole lot better than he was last year. And fantasy wise, I think you're going to see some things that are going to be, if you get a quarterback that gets hurt and you can bring on Bryce Young, or you draft Bryce Young late in a draft and have him as your second quarterback, and all of a sudden he starts taking off, you can put him in and things like that. So really tier 4 are guys that I could live with if I waited that long for a quarterback. I could live with these guys in tier number 4 because there are some veterans that, again, I just have concerns about, and that's why I dropped them down to this. And then I've got some rookies in this tier 2. What does your tier 4 look like?
Tier 4, I did have Caleb Williams there. I had Pittsburgh quarterback, figured to be Wilson, but not knowing which one that's going to be. I did have in there, I had Jaden Daniels, as well as Kyler Murray and Sam Darnold and Derek Carr.
Okay. Interesting. So Sam Darnold, let's talk about him a little bit. I will not touch him with a 10-foot pole. I think he loses his job within 5 weeks of the season starting. I could be wrong on that, of course. I just don't think he's going to be what they're hoping he's going to be. And all of the publicity is on JJ McCarthy. I didn't even put him in my rankings, and didn't even put him on here. So I left him off completely because I think, in my opinion, he's undraftable. I don't see why you draft Sam Darnold. He's the kind of quarterback that if he does take off, you can claim him on waivers in week 2. I cannot see him being on my fantasy team whatsoever. Outside of that, there's nothing that's super surprising, I don't think, in those rankings, Dad. The last tier I have is tier 5, and I've got Russell Wilson, Will Levis, and Derek Carr in that category, and Baker Mayfield in that category there. So again, these are guys that really I don't have much of an interest in having them on my team. I think that they are, QB2, and not. I don't want to bank my season on these 4 guys. I do not feel comfortable with that. But if I got a guy goes down and all the other guys are gone, then these are the guys I go at before I go for the Sam Darnolds or the Geno Smiths or the backups to whoever these other guys are, with maybe the exception of Pittsburgh and Atlanta. I like their backups, but I don't know, Dad. For me, Russell Wilson, Will Levis, Derek Carr, and Baker Mayfield are kind of the last line for me at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, my tiers were set up a little bit different. Before I got to tier 4 or whatever, I already had 19 quarterbacks listed. So, yeah, I'm not planning on drafting Sam Darnold either. But I just, as I put everybody into tiers here, and we'll see. We'll see. Caleb Williams might end up being good. No doubt about it. He does have some weapons, but some of these other guys, Baker Mayfield has weapons. He has 2 really good wide receivers.
Does he though?
2 of the best wide receivers.
In their day, they were 2 of the best. And listen, in their day, they were 2 of the best, but they're not 2 of the best right now. They're good. I mean, I'm not saying they're bad, but you can't tell me that having 2 wide receivers is better than having 3 solid wide receivers and a tight end and 2 running backs. Like, Tampa just does not have the weapons that Chicago has. They might end up with a better record than Chicago, but when we're talking about fantasy football, I just think Williams has a way better, line of weapons to use than does Baker Mayfield. And I like Baker Mayfield, and I like Mike Evans. I think Chris Godwin is a hard one to have on your fantasy team because I think he is so up and down. So I think that's harmful. But that being said, I mean, I don't mind Baker Mayfield being higher than where I have him. I think he just needs to be below some of the other guys that you have ahead of him.
Yeah, like I said, we'll see. You're definitely a little higher on the Bear guys than I am, and they may end up being real good. I mean, I've no doubt about it. Stafford's got some weapons too. That guy that was a rookie last year, he's really, really good. And Dak Prescott's got a very good wide receiver, and we'll just we'll see where it comes down there. From there, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I kind of understand what you're saying about Galloway or the guy for
Godwin.
Tampa. Godwin, yeah.
Chris Godwin.
He's kind of up and down, but I'm not sure DJ Moore's been an absolute star every year either. So, but he could be this year. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think that if you give me in their prime, I take Chris Godwin over DJ. But I think in this season, I don't. Chris Godwin has been so inconsistent. And DJ Moore, listen, I mean, I do not go to bat for DJ Moore as I would for some guys. But I think when you put in the totality, again, the tight ends included in this, the running backs that they bring in that are going to be catching the ball out of the backfield. There's just Caleb Williams has good weapons. And I think the Bears, I think their ceiling is 8 wins. I think they're probably more in the 6 to 7 win range. But for fantasy football, I think you're going to see Caleb Williams scoring fantasy points. But I don't think you're going to see him scoring more than Justin Herbert. I don't think you're going to see him scoring more than Dak Prescott. So that's why I had him in tier number 4. But I think he does outscore Baker Mayfield. I think he could outscore and probably does outscore Deshaun Watson, although he has some extra weapons this year too. So I don't know. I'm intrigued by it for sure. Who are the guys that you have in later tiers that you say, I've got them down a little bit low, but I'm kind of got my eye on him because I think he could have a really good year?
Well, for me, again, one of them would be, you had him kind of high, but it would be Richardson, because again, he's got great potential depending on his, his injury situation. Again, I'm kind of intrigued with Stafford. I wouldn't want him to be my number 1 quarterback, but, I don't know. He could come back and have a good year. Like you said, Deshaun Watson, that one's kind of up in the air. Tua is an interesting one because he does have so many weapons. He's going to score points, no doubt about it there. And probably one guy that's intriguing is Trevor Lawrence. A couple of years ago, I was always a little higher on him than you, but I would have taken him as one of my first quarterbacks if I needed to. Well, you kind of wouldn't do that now, but again, I think that the talent is there. So Trevor Lawrence could end up, he's a guy you'd have to watch. And if you can get him as your second guy, early on, you might really have something there from that standpoint. But be interesting to see how he does. And of course, Aaron Rodgers is a real wild card. Like you said, there's injury things there. He has talent on that team, people to throw to, and a running back. But if everybody can be healthy, but again, that whole thing could just blow up also. So we will see. Yeah.
I didn't go back and look at it. I think it's been a while since Rodgers has been a top tier fantasy quarterback. And by a while, I'm saying 6-7 years. He was always kind of that. He was top 10, but maybe lower top 10 ranking or whatnot. So he is intriguing for sure. He's got a chip on his shoulder, which is when he plays best. And so maybe he has a great year this year. For me, it's Bryce Young. I already talked about it. I don't love the talent that's around him, but I love the system he's in, and I think he's going to have a much better year. I think he's going to be a value pick this year in fantasy football. Trevor Lawrence, I really want to like Trevor Lawrence, but Dad, I don't like what the Jacksonville Jaguars have done to help him out. I don't love his receiving core. I don't hate it either, but I'm not excited about it. So for me, the kind of the lower tiered guys to watch is all young guys. Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, and Jaden Daniels are the guys I got my eye on. Deshaun Watson, I have him bolded on my list just because to me, he's one of the greatest unknowns. They have a really good football team. They should be a really good football team. But I mean, Deshaun Watson, we just haven't seen that fire out of him as of late either. So that worries me. When we get through the other positions, we'll kind of talk about kind of some of what right now, the weapons that these guys have. When we do running backs and receivers and tight ends. But I'm interested to see how this shakes out. I'm interested to see even by the time we draft, if I still feel the same way about some of these guys, as we'll see some of them in preseason. We'll know a little bit more about them and stuff like that. I've got Justin Herbert in tier 3. You had him slightly higher. I think he potentially could be really, really good in fantasy this year, but he also potentially he could be really, really poor in fantasy, and they could win the division, and he may not be a top-tier fantasy quarterback. So he's one that you got to watch as well. And I think Kyler Murray, I mentioned that. We talked about him in the tiers also. You had him a lot lower than me. But, I mean, again, they go out and they get Marvin Harrison Jr. If he's healthy and they've got this system that's going to work for him, and they do have some weapons as well. Kyler Murray is that he's the stereotypical great fantasy quarterback if he can be out there on the field. So we'll see how he does as well. Dad, you did not mention, or at least I did not hear you mention, Will Levis from the Tennessee Titans. He was in my final tier, mainly because, again, he is an athlete, and I think that he can score some fantasy points, especially with Derrick Henry being gone. Kind of opens the door for them to be a little bit more open with him, and they bring in Callahan, who has a dynamic offense in Cincinnati, comes down too. So I think that helps Will Levis. So I had to put him in my tiers, but again, I don't feel comfortable with Will Levis at this point. But what was your thinking on him?
Yeah, I just don't know where the Titans are going to be. I do think they've got a good coach, and they have picked up some players from there. I don't know. I mean, I assume he's going to be the starter, but I don't,
Yes.
Again, he's not a guy I'm going to draft. He's a guy I would watch, and, first week or two, all of a sudden, he's something, and then you try to pick him up maybe. But I think to take Will Levis early, and again, we may learn more, like you said, in the preseason. He may look a lot better and things there. And the Titans could be a totally different team with a different coach. So we'll see. But I think it'll take a while for that to turn around. And I just didn't. Like I said, I just and he may be better than a couple of the guys I had. He may be better than Derek Carr this year. He's probably better. He may be better than Sam Darnold. I don't know, but I don't know that he's out of their class very much.
I would be comfortable, and I don't gamble, but I would be comfortable in gambling money that Levis starts more games than Sam Darnold this year, and that means he outscores Sam Darnold too, for sure. That being said, yeah, he doesn't excite me at the same time either. All right, so we'll continue through our fantasy rankings and tiers each week as we lead up to the fantasy football draft season, and we'll do that in the segment we call the Fantasy Focus, presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com. All right, Dad. Anything else NFL wise? I can't think of anything on top of my head, but anything else NFL wise that we need to cover before we move on?
No, nothing big at this point. Like I said, it's kind of, waiting to come back to training camp and everything. Now there will be some things happen, but no. And like I said, the emphasis here really will be fantasy football pretty quick. Getting ready for that. So, and that's always a fun time for sure.
For sure. All right, let's transition to NASCAR, Dad. We had a really fun race at Iowa last week. I listened to it and was watching just through the driver cameras this past week, and a lot of fun to listen to. Again, I found that listening to NASCAR, it makes every race sound exciting. So sometimes I talk to someone who watched it and they go, that was boring as all get out. I'm going, well, I listened to it on the radio and it was an absolute blast. But it was a fun race, and it was exciting to see how it came down to the end with some important guys there, of course, as well, coming into the season, and Blaney getting the win there. Now they head to Loudon, and the standings is getting so tight right now because you got guys that are in as far as points go, but if another guy outside like an Austin Cindric gets a win, then all of a sudden it puts more of a chokehold on these guys trying to make the playoffs. So do you have any thoughts on that playoff race and kind of where guys are in the standings and what you think they're thinking at this point in the season?
Well, like you said, I've been, listening to stuff some and looking, and that really is the issue because there's some pretty solid guys, some solid racers and teams that haven't won a race yet. And you get some of these guys, like Suarez and ones that have won a race, all of a sudden, it pushes people out. And the Fords have gotten better in the last few weeks.
Yes.
So I think now drivers are looking at there's a vast number of guys that could sneak up and get a win here. And, we got eight races left before the playoffs. And so, it'll be interesting to see if, some of the dominant guys, will keep winning, and then that will keep some of the surprises out. But definitely some guys have ran well. And there's already some guys that'll be in the playoffs that people wouldn't have expected. So we'll just see how that goes. I did think the Iowa race was a good race. I watched some of it. There was a lot of passing, a lot of movement. It was, a lot of fun to watch. And like I said, I think things are a little tighter now with the three, with Ford, Chevy, and Toyota as far as going into a race, not knowing, what manufacturer is going to necessarily be the favorite to win. So, and then that probably makes it a lot more exciting for everybody.
Yeah. And, Loudon is a 1 mile track. Fords have been really good on the shorter tracks this year as well. Of course, having Austin Cindric, who won a race, so he's in. Brad Keselowski's won a race, so he's in. Blaney won a race, so he's in for the Fords. Buscher and Logano and Briscoe all fighting for playoff spots still for the Fords. JGR has been phenomenal this year, as has Hendrick. Larson and Hamlin are, expected to win pretty much every race, and certainly have been very, very good. But you're looking at the guys that are trying to make it in, that are towards the cut line there. Ross Chastain, Ty Gibbs, Alex Bowman, and then Buscher and Wallace currently in, with Logano, Kyle Busch, and Briscoe on the outside looking in. Suarez and Cindric having those wins, they're in, and that really hurts those guys there at the back end. And I would surely think that one of these guys, at least, if not multiple of these guys, of Chastain, Gibbs, Bowman, Buscher, Logano, I think they're going to win some races here before it's all said and done too. But you could have a surprise guy, a Carson Hocevar, Noah Gragson, somebody like that jumps up and gets a win that would really do damage to these guys' playoff races for sure. Do you have any thoughts on this week's race at Loudon when it comes to fantasy wise? Do you have a philosophy or some guys to watch out for this week?
No, I've looked at it a little bit. At this point, fantasy-wise, you're getting to where you have to look at how many times you've used a driver. So you've got to kind of move them around from that standpoint. So I've got to go with a couple guys maybe that I haven't used as much. And I think the tricky thing has been to know which of the top drivers. You think, well, Larson is, he definitely, I used him and he didn't work out too good last week from there. And it's kind of that way with several of them. The 24 car early on looked like, boy, you'd always want to go with that. Same way with Hamlin, but, you kind of don't know. And when you got a short track like this, you've always got things with wrecks and different things going on. So the thing to look at, I think, is just look at some of the other short tracks, some of the other tracks that were similar to this one, and who ran well there. And then again, I'll just watch it, the qualifying, and see who qualifies. I've got 5 guys, set right now, and a garage guy, but you kind of look at it and see if maybe, okay, one of those guys I ought to drop out, or maybe I can have another guy I haven't used as much and put him up in there. I do think, you do look at momentum, and one guy who has definitely gotten better is Joey Logano. And, he's been good. So he's a guy I think you have to keep looking at. And again, the Fords, a few races ago, you were kind of scared to worry about using very many of those. And of course, Blaney's strong, and several of them. But like I said, Ty Gibbs started out good and is really good, but hasn't won yet. And different ones, there, like you said, Chastain, seems to run well every time. I didn't use Chase there early on. And
Chase Elliott,
and so I can use him now, and he's been doing real well too. So Chase Elliott. So it just depends who you've used and who you haven't. But he's been real consistent, and up near the top also. But like you said, the Toyotas have been strong with Joe Gibbs Racing. Of course, Hendricks is strong, and So, you just kind of have to look and see. I think there's more and more good teams now, so it's just a little more wide open. The key, I think, is getting the right guy in your garage so you can, take a look. And if somebody does get wrecked out early or something, you've got somebody to move in, or maybe somebody that you can move, a guy you've used a lot back down and not have to finish him up in that race. So we'll see. A lot of people are very high, on was it the 54 car this week, Truex,
Yeah.
and but he hasn't done that well. So I don't know, but I feel like he's going to win, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, Truex he's top 5 in points, so he's done fine. He just hasn't won yet. But I've managed my drivers, so I can have what I consider to be top tier drivers every week here as we close out the season. I've got Blaney, Keselowski, and Logano as my Fords this week. I've got Truex, Hamlin, and Bell in as well. I have 0 Chevys currently in my lineup. That could change after qualifying. But I think Hamlin and Truex are guys that you have to have in if you have the availability. And then I think, Keselowski, Logano, and even Blaney. Blaney's good here, and Loudon. And again, I go Ford heavy here because they've been really good in these 1 miles for sure. So obviously, I don't think you can go wrong if you're going to put in a Larson or a William Byron, even though NASCAR tells you Byron's someone you should avoid this week. At the end of the day, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Kyle Larson are typically going to be safe. Now, they could crash out as could anybody, but they're typically going to be safe as well. But this week, I'm going heavy with JGR and heavy with Fords, and we'll see how that shakes out for me. It's shaking out okay for me so far this season as a whole. We have been in our league. Been fighting it out all season. Dad, you and I are in second and third. I'm in second. You're in third, but barely. You're really close right there. And so we're seeing a guy who started the season getting third place every single week has been in first place now for a while. And then we got some fun guys chasing us from behind as well. So it's been fun. Fantasy NASCAR makes it much more fun to watch NASCAR, in my opinion, as well. So lots of things there. So should be a good weekend at Loudon, and they're on USA Network this week, I believe. After this week, it goes to NBC, and so we'll be able to see more of more actual racing on TV than what we've been able to see as of late. I mean, many people have the USA Network or whatever it may be, but anyway. So let's see here. This week is in Loudon. Then they go to Nashville the following week. That'll be on NBC, followed by the Chicago Street Race, which is where your fantasy lineup gets kind of saved because you can put different guys in that street race than what you'd normally put in on your other tracks, and it might get you through another week there as well. Before Pocono, Indianapolis, Richmond, Michigan, and then Daytona and Darlington to close out the regular season before the round of 16 starts in Atlanta. All right. That's all I think we're going to cover, Dad. We're not going to get into baseball unless you think there's something that we must talk about.
No, I think, like I said, the one thing left yet still going on is championship in college baseball, 2 out of 3. And, the Tennessee Vols are in that. So we'll see how that goes.
Yep, and the Olympics, by the way, Olympics are getting ready to get moving, as well as the trials and things have been going on too. So the summer will be plenty busy with baseball, drafts in NBA, and fantasy drafts and all that kind of stuff as well. So next week, the plan is when we come back, we'll be talking more fantasy football. We'll get you up to date on the baseball. Of course, you can tune in every Sunday night to the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show, and we'll get you covered there. And then let's see here, Monday, the local hour, covering EKU football right now, doing position previews. Looking forward to having the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, and one of the linebackers, Kylan Robinson, will join us on Monday night. Is always a good time there as well. And then the last thing I'll mention, Dad, I announced that at the local hour on Monday, but the Sports Stove is doing a documentary podcast. And so with the help of my friends over at Belly Up Sports, we are starting the work on a documentary podcast. I believe it'll be 6 episodes on the life of Matthew Jackson, who is currently a safety for the Tennessee Titans. He played college ball here at EKU, and he's got a fun story. And so we're going to be starting the recording on that soon. Hopefully the production will be done by the end of the summer is the hope, and we'll have that out. So excited to get into that project also. That'll be it's going to be a big time-consuming project, but it's going to be fun. And once it's done, I think people are really going to enjoy it as well. Matt is a great guy and has a fun story. He's a great personality too. So that'll be a lot of fun for sure. All right. Follow us on social media at Sports Stove on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you tune into the next episodes that we have. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify or somewhere else, throw a review on there for us. We'd greatly appreciate that as well. Don't forget about righteousfelon.com to get yourself some jerky. Use the code STOVE15 at checkout to get 15% off your purchase. Thank you for tuning into this edition of the Sports Stove Podcast. Until next time, we'll see you around the Sports Stove.